Good day, I'm Neesa Moodley, and this is Asset TV coming to you from the GEPF Annual Thought Leadership Conference for 2023. With me today is Delphine Govender, founder of Perpetua Asset Management. Welcome, Delphine.
Thank you, Neesa.
So, as a pioneer in the field, what have you observed and what have the changes been in terms of women representation in asset management?
That's a great question, Neesa. I've been in the industry over 25 years, and in this time, there's clearly been an improvement in terms of the number of women in the entire industry, from perhaps what was gross underrepresentation to over half of the industry is probably now made up of women. But I think the critical thing is that where we still see a very stark shortfall is that we just still don't see enough women in what we call the power seats or the decision-making seats. So in the decision-making seat of the portfolio manager role, in the chief investment officer role, the head of the investment team, the chief executive officer role, still massively underrepresented. In some of the best firms, in terms of the cohort of perhaps already diverse firms, even in those firms that are already embracing diversity, across that whole cohort, there's probably only about 18% women representation in those decision-making roles. So while I think you're seeing the pipeline coming through, and you're seeing a lot of women in almost the roles that are operational, support, etc., we still just need to see more growth in the investment and the business decision-making senior roles.
Great. And then talking about that pipeline, how do we grow the pipeline of women asset managers? Is mentoring the answer? What is the solution?
I think the way I look at it is that when you are starting and you're dealing with almost a status quo that is as unequal as the industry is from a gender representation or gender parity, because it clearly has very little parity, as I've articulated, in those specific roles, particularly investing. You almost have to accept that you need multiple initiatives and multiple interventions to shift that. So on one hand, you probably need mentoring, yes, for almost that mid-level professional or that young professional that's coming in. You want to increase their odds of them staying in the industry because clearly they've got the skills or the qualifications to join. So you definitely want to have mentoring programs that are quite directly connected. I think the firms and the industry itself also needs to almost self-reflect about, is this an environment that women feel a sense of belonging, or is it an environment because it's just been so male-dominated for so long, is almost unconsciously aware that it's actually not very welcoming or almost oppressive to women. But then you've got to go further down the pipeline. A typical investment professional probably takes at least a decade or 15 years to grow and nurture. So, if we want to see a big cohort of portfolio managers in 10 years' time, we need to have hired those women today, and they need to be trained. But then to hire those women today, we need to go back to university and say, are those young women in university and college picking finance and the related qualifications? I'm also part of CFA Society South Africa, and one of the things that we know is a CFA qualification is also quite a good, almost benchmark to get into the industry. So do we have enough women doing CFA? And then lastly, actually go all the way back to school. Most young girls already from around grade 9, 10 are starting to think about what they want to be, what do they want to study at university. And in fact, the investment industry has not done a very good job at creating awareness about the industry and its roles. If you think, young girls and women and young girls at school know about medicine, they know about actuarial science, they know about accounting, they tend not to know about. So create awareness about the investment industry. So it's really a long pipeline. And I'm glad to say that we're starting to see many organizations doing a lot more to do this.
And as somebody who's led one of the first, I think, Black female-led asset managers in the country, what have you experienced as challenges around this perception that women asset managers need more support?
I think the challenge is that because there are few women-led firms, anything that your firm is doing tends to be attributed to your gendered status. So the fact that you're women-led. So whatever it is you're doing, and then it's almost looked through a lens that is almost overly emphasizing the gender attribute as opposed to some other attribute. So it's almost quite like patronizing and patriarchal to think that the women-led firm needs some more support, needs more of a bench. A women-led, a team that's led by a woman must have many male portfolio managers. That sort of perception. It's largely because if there's an unconscious bias that has a belief that power structures, patriarchy, skill, meritocracy comes in a specific package, and that package has typically been male, and in fact globally it's also a pale male. So you are dealing with almost multiple levels of an inbred and a systemic bias that is not true. And all I think any women-led firm, women-led team is asking for is just to have an equal playing field, to not actually be viewed through that lens. Because ultimately we're all there for, a very meritocratic outcome. We're not there for an outcome that is anything less. But we actually have to go through many loops and hurdles to almost prove that we can do it. So I think that's been perhaps one of the frustrations. Interestingly, though, a woman entrepreneur is already almost conscious about the hurdles that she has to go through and the biases that she has to overcome. So those that have the grit, have the resilience, and stay in the game are probably going to realize that they're worth much more than their metal than their male counterparts.
Grit and resilience. I really like those themes. I can't let you go without mentioning that I think I've watched your star rise in the asset management industry, and now you've become a pioneer as a leader. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us today.
Thank you, Neesa. Thank you for the support.